I would like to call this meeting January 2nd, 2024 of the Tompkins County Legislature to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will take roll call of members. Shauna Black. Sorry. Here. Travis Brooks.
Here.
Randy Brown.
Here.
Amanda Champion.
Here.
Susan Curry.
Here.
Deborah Dawson.
Here.
Rich John.
Here.
Dan Klein.
Here.
Ann Corman.
Here.
Mike Lane.
Here.
Greg Mezzi.
Here.
Veronica Pillar. Veronica Pillar. Lee Shirtliff.
Here.
Mike Sigler.
Here.
I have 13 members present. First order of business tonight would be the election of a temporary chair. I'd like to open the floor for nominations. Deborah Dawson.
I'd like to nominate Mike Lane.
Do I have a second? Travis Brooks. Are there any other nominations? I'd like to close the floor for nominations. Can I have a motion? Lee Shirtliff, and a second. Deborah Dawson. We'll do a roll call for closing nominations. Shauna Black.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Mike Lane.
Yes.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar. Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
13 ayes. And now can we take a roll call for the election of Mr. Lane as temporary chair? Shauna Black.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Mike Lane.
Yes.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
14 ayes. Congratulations, Mr. Lane, as temporary chair.
Thank you all for an office that's very short and sweet, once a year. Two things I want to say before I call for nominations for our chair is I want to really publicly thank the staff of our legislature. Our Chief Clerk, Katrina McCloy, who just opened this meeting, our Chief Deputy Clerk, Brittany Greep, our two clerks, Jordan White and Taylor Spencer. I think without their help, we wouldn't be operating as smoothly as we do. So I want to just say thank you to them. The other thing I'd like to mention is that I think it's so important what we do every year. We are a charter county in the state of New York. We support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of New York. We also support our own charter, which is our local constitution. And when the framers of our charter put together a charter county back in the 1970s, one of the things they did, which I think was brilliant, was they said that we will re-elect leadership every year. Many counties, once there's an election of a group of supervisors or legislators, they elect a chair or vice chair for the full term. Could be 4 years. But we take the time every year to relook at our leadership, possibly to change, possibly to keep it the same, and that gives us a fresh look. And I think that that is one of the best things that our charter does for us. So I will leave it at that, but I think it's nice that we think about that. Our order of business this evening will be the election of a chair for 2024. And I'm going to open the floor to nominations. I'm going to call on Amanda Champion first.
Thank you. I barely even raised my hand, and you called on me. I'm happy to nominate Dan Klein to be the next chair of the legislature. Dan has served on this legislature for 10 years, and I believe he has the knowledge and skills to lead the organization. Dan fights hard for what he believes in, but he also respects others' positions and accepts when he makes a mistake or loses a vote. Dan takes his job seriously, but he also brings levity to what can be very challenging work. Early on in my time here, Dan shared with me his view on our role as legislators. He said, "These seats are not ours. We are merely stewards of them for a short time." For Dan, this job is not about ego or power. It is about listening and learning. It's about making thoughtful decisions, and it's about operating a good government to support the community and provide services for the people of our county. I think Dan will be a leader who listens to his colleagues and works hard for the community. And I look forward to seeing the good things this legislature can do under his leadership. It's my honor to nominate Dan Klein for chair of legislature.
I'll ask for a second. Lee.
Mr. Temporary Chairman, over the past 2 years, I've noticed something about Dan Klein. He's often the last legislator to weigh in and speak when we discuss a resolution. My sense is that he is a person who listens carefully, weighs the points of view deliberately, and then provides us with his thoughtful analysis. When Dan speaks first, he does so usually as a committee chair who provides us with a usually concise but comprehensive summary of the issues at hand. I've watched as Dan has walked us through and given insights on such complex issues as human services, TCAT, the Community Recovery Fund, and even fund balances. No easy chores whatsoever. And as chair, I believe that Mr. Klein will steer this body forward in a similarly steady, thoughtful, inclusive, and balanced manner. I'm very honored to second this nomination.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to close nominations. Deborah Dawson, seconded by Amanda Champion. Can we call the roll, please? I would note that we've also been joined this evening by Veronica. She's on the screen.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Mike Lane.
Yes.
14 ayes. Congratulations, Mr. Klein.
Now we need to vote, please, on the election of Dan Klein as our chair for 2024. You can respond by saying yes if you want, or no, or whichever you want to do. So let's have the roll call, please.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Mike Lane.
Yes.
14 ayes. Congratulations, Mr.
Congratulations.
Nameplate in hand.
Thank you,
Excuse me,
everybody.
Dan, but there are people that are standing, there's some chairs over here if they...
Thank you, everybody. I am honored and humbled and excited to be taking this role. And it's my intention to live up to your expectations and to also live up to my own expectations of myself. The only other thing I want to say tonight on this regard is I just want to thank Shauna Black, our outgoing chair, for her leadership these past 2 years. Thank you, Shauna. And I will have more remarks to say in 2 weeks at our next meeting, but for now, let's get back to business. And the next order of business is the election of the vice chair of the Tompkins County Legislature. Is there a nomination from the floor? Travis Brooks.
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Shauna Black to be our vice chair.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, I would like to second that.
Susan.
And thank Shonda. Am I muted?
No, you're good. We can hear you.
Oh, good. I would like to second that nomination and thank Shauna for her leadership and guidance.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations from the floor? So I truly do not mean to make a lot of changes, but I did check Robert's Rules of Order, and we can just close nominations if there are no more without having to vote on it. So are there any more nominations from the floor? Seeing none, I'm closing the nominations, and we are going to have a vote. The vote is a yes or no for Shauna Black for vice chair.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Mike Lane.
Yes.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
14 ayes.
Do you want to say anything, Shauna?
I just thank all of you again for trusting me to be part of your leadership team. I look forward to working with you again, Dan. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, before we go on, I do want to say, yes, there's a lot of people here tonight to speak, and we'll get to that part in just a few minutes. There are a few empty chairs over here. If anybody would like to sit, there are still some seats available. And also, if you intend to speak tonight, then you're going to want to fill out one of these blue forms that are located in the back of the room. If you just fill it out and bring it right up to us, and we'll get you in the queue to speak. Okay, presentation of proclamations, petitions, communications, and notices. Just what's in the red folder, right? Okay. So we will be having executive session tonight, and I will give the specific classifications later before we go into executive session. As far as reordering of business, I thought it would be a good idea to delay the legislature privilege of the floor until after the presentation. I'm guessing that the legislators might want to react to our presentation tonight. So if that's acceptable to everyone, we'll just push that off a little further down the agenda. Which brings us up to privilege of the floor for the public. Let me read the rules that you've agreed to if you're going to speak. Thank you. I agree to a 3-minute time limit. I agree not to raise my voice. I agree not to use lewd, obscene, profane, slanderous, or libelous language, or to speak or act in a manner that would tend to incite a breach of the peace. I agree not to speak about county personnel matters. Personnel matters include comments about the job performance of named county employees other than elected officials. After 3 minutes, I agree to leave the microphone and yield the floor. Transferring time to another person is not permitted. I agree that if I cause a disruption and I'm asked to leave, I will leave chambers. Okay, with that. Jordan Clemens, you're up first. The speakers can come up to the microphones on either side.
Hello, good evening. Happy New Year. I'm Jordan Clemens. I'm the founder and president of a grassroots revitalization nonprofit called Unbroken Promise Initiative, addressing the barriers to access, education, and equity in underserved communities. And our focus currently, since 2020, has been on the west end of Ithaca. I'm a sixth generation. I'm currently a city of Ithaca resident. The beginning of fall 2021, UPI and TCAT agreed to collaborate on UPI's transportation project addressing needs for underserved communities on the West End, West Hill. In collaboration with TCAT, UPI provided in its organizational model, long and short range solution-oriented transportation plan, along with real-time communal informed data from City of Ithaca's most transportation disadvantaged population on the West End, West Hill, to leverage opportunities at the local, state, and federal levels for resources. The market, as you know, is very large, and the problem is that oftentimes the state and federal have issues with is these opportunities are lost, which communities in the underserved can't afford. It was understood that the UPI-TCAT collaboration had the potential to establish best practices between community and transportation service providers across the country. Despite working in good faith with TCAT admin for over 2 years, UPI has been unable to get the agreed upon terms in a contract to move forward. It was alleged by TCAT project management that NYSERDA felt it was best to move forward without UPI being involved in the implementation phase. However, UPI has recently met with NYSERDA, and they are willing to work around whatever UPI and TCAT agree to, but are unable to influence negotiations, making it a local issue. UPI has informed TCAT at its most recent board meeting in December. UPI has also spoke to our representative, Travis Brooks, and City of Ithaca Common Council regarding this matter. UPI has not yet gotten a response. I am asking for Tompkins County Legislature to investigate this matter and pull stakeholders together to find a resolution, and in return, securing the integrity of the county charter. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next up is Greggs Brooks English.
Hello and thank you, distinguished Tompkins County representatives. My name is Greg Brooks English, resident of Ithaca, New York, and I'd like to share with you that I am in favor of the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza. And I want to let you know why for the following reasons. I value the fundamental basis for the support of the resolution encouraging equality and discouraging discrimination of both Israelis and Palestinians under international law, international humanitarian law, and international human rights law as affirmed by the United Nations on November 15th of last year. Also, I am fully aware that leading human rights organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Israel's own leading human rights organization, B'Tselem, consider Israel to be an apartheid state, just like South Africa, and an occupying force. In the words of Nobel Prize-winning South African human rights activist Desmond Tutu, who we all know, Israel's settler state policies are similar to South Africa under apartheid, and that South Africa accused Israel of genocide last Friday in the International Court of Justice and asked the UN court to order a halt to fighting in the embattled Gaza Strip, saying that Israel was trying to destroy, quote, Palestinians in Gaza, unquote. The October 7th Hamas attack killing 1,200 Israelis cannot be understood in a vacuum, but must be understood in the context of a 75-year occupation. And that while Israel says it is at war with Hamas, its actions reveal its true intent. Fire belt bombing of entire neighborhoods, dropping 6,000 plus unguided 2,000-pound bombs do not indicate any intention of targeting Hamas, but does indicate the liquidation of 2.2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Moreover, the cutting off of all communications, water, food, fuel, electricity is not targeting Hamas, but all Gazans, especially the most vulnerable like young children, targeting water treatment plants, mosques, churches, bakeries, cultural centers, entire universities, hospitals, basically all infrastructure, and is intent on supporting the spread of communicable diseases that are spreading like wildfire at the moment. Over 100 journalists killed, 135 UNRWA staff been killed. Israel is setting historical records. Basically, I want to implore you to, as a tax-paying resident of the USA and Tompkins County, I do not want my tax dollars supporting this unfolding genocide and forced transfer of an indigenous population. We already have the blood on our hands of indigenous populations of upstate and downstate New York as a settler state colonial empire. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Susan Malter.
Susan Moulter, Town of Ithaca, speaking for myself. I strongly agree with the resolution of the Human Rights Commission of Tompkins County, urging our legislature to call on our president, the U.S. House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate to demand an immediate, permanent ceasefire. In addition, I want to say why I think the issue is appropriate for a county legislature to discuss. Some weeks ago, I walked in a march with several hundred people here in Ithaca in opposition to the killing of thousands of innocent children in Gaza. An apparent Caucasian woman carried a large sign up on a post so you could see it from a distance. And it said, "I am here for my Jewish neighbors." I'll repeat that. I am here for my Jewish neighbors. What that meant to me is that our Jewish friends are also horrified at the carnage and desperately want to stop it. But they are frightened to be identified and targeted with hatred and anti-Semitism, so cruel that it recently made national news when the governor of New York State intervened. There's no place for hatred, because that can lead to violence, destruction, and death. We can help prevent that by passing this resolution. I certainly hope you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sarah Fern.
Hello. Can people hear me? I'm myself a little hard of hearing, so I don't know when I'm shouting, so
Yes,
sorry.
we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm Sarah Fern. I'm a City of Ithaca resident, and I strongly support what this legislature is doing to call for a ceasefire. I feel that as an American, I live in a country that was founded by freedom fighters, and my ancestors were freedom fighters. And so for that reason, I cannot call Hamas terrorists. I'm sorry. I have to call them freedom fighters. And I will call the organization in Israel who does promote the most terror. I will call them terrorists, and that is the IDF. And the Palestinians, as we've already heard, have lived under a far worse oppression than our forefathers lived under when we had our own revolution. We were not killed, we were not, well, everything that's been done and land stolen and everything is just way beyond. But another point I want to make is that the Israeli government has the best spy and surveillance system in the world. And they could easily have pinpointed every single one of their attacks to be not against civilians, but against Hamas, easily. Plus, their surveillance and their spy network advised them that October 7th was going to happen. And they chose to ignore it, and not only ignore it, but put the IDF way over in the West Bank. Now, why did they do that? To get the sympathy of the world. This was a terrible thing, October 7th. Wasn't it terrible? And don't forget that some of those 1,200 people who were killed were so-called friendly fire, not mistakes. They were told to kill, to shoot at everybody on October 7th, when the police and the IDF finally did arrive. So another point I want to make is, of course, I'm heartsick about the way the Palestinians are and have been treated for 75 years. But I also want to say that I have a great deal of sympathy and empathy for the Israeli people. Not unlike ourselves, they're being lied to by their government and their major media. However, they also have compulsory military service, which starts at the age of 18. This means that almost, there are exceptions, almost every citizen must take part in the military service. And in that service, they must take part. They are forced to take part in atrocities against human beings. For this reason, there is the highest incident of PTSD in the world among Israelis. More so than among Palestinians? Yes. And these people are being harmed by the fact that their national identity is completely based on racism.
Excuse me, Sarah. Your 3 minutes is up. If you want to conclude your remarks, finish your sentence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, happy perihelion. That's today. The Earth is the closest to the sun it will be for the year.
Thank you. Next up, Marie McCrae.
I'm Marie McCrae. I live in Dryden. And I'm here tonight in support of the resolution written and adopted by the Human Rights Commission. And I'm here to ask, to encourage you to adopt a resolution of your own to send to our representatives in Washington asking for a permanent ceasefire. There are so many reasons. You will hear many of them tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Zach Wynn.
Good evening. My name is Zach Wynn. It's my understanding that the county is soliciting feedback on environmental contamination relating to unsanctioned encampments. I have included the legislature on an email I have sent to Tompkins County Environmental Health with photographs showing the location of contaminated campsites on both City of Ithaca and Town of Ithaca land. Of particular concern is Jungle Encampment Number 1 by the inlet behind Warehouse Carpet Outlet in Agway. A great deal of debris is making its way into the inlet, and one camp in that area has approximately 200 bicycles that are almost certainly stolen. Additionally, there are pictures of encampments behind Lowe's, which start at the edge of the parking lot and extend fairly deeply into the woods. These encampments are directly behind Nate's Floral Estates, and they too contain a great deal of bikes that are likely stolen. Many of these camps have been the site of meth cooks, and smoke from burning plastic often emanate from these camps across downtown. They are hotbeds of criminal activity, and in the photographs you'll see a number of discarded purses and cash boxes, as well as electronics that were considered valueless that were also likely stolen. The county has begun to float the idea for a second homeless shelter. I suggest the county investigate purchasing the building owned and previously occupied by the Cancer Resource Center 2 doors down from St. John's Homeless Shelter and transform it into a women's only shelter. This would alleviate the difficulty that would be faced by the Cancer Resource Center in finding a buyer on the open market, considering the nature of activity around the building. In the longer term, I believe it would be wise to locate a shelter and supportive living apartments outside of the city of Ithaca. A huge proportion of those who are living on the street are suffering from drug addiction, and Ithaca is a terrible place to try and get clean. Acquiring the building would be a good use of current and future opioid settlement funds. The current accommodations, I am told, are less than ideal congregate living arrangements. I believe also a single room occupancy model will encourage people to begin to live a normal life and return to society. Thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Deirdre Silverman.
In our Passover Seders, for thousands of years, Jews have asked 4 questions about what distinguishes Passover from other nights. So although it's not Passover now, I am going to ask these 4 questions. Why is this war different from other wars? Because we are watching the horrors of this war unfold, documented in real time. We cannot turn away. We cannot say we didn't know how many were killed, tortured, starved. Why does this war require us as Americans to act and speak out, to demand an end to the carnage and devastation? Because we are paying for this war with the $3.8 billion we send to Israel every year, with the extra arms and ammunition Biden has unilaterally sent them, and with the additional billions soon to be considered by Congress. All this while Israel has facilitated billions of dollars going to Hamas through Qatar to strengthen Hamas and prevent a viable 2-state option. And while Israel is also a major exporter of arms to authoritarian countries such as India. Why should the Tompkins County Legislature speak out on this issue when there are other atrocities in the world? Because our federal government is unwilling or unable to intervene as a friend or ally should when a partner is out of control. Our federal officials need to hear from local leaders that the U.S. people want a ceasefire and end to the killing and oppression. Why is the Human Rights Commission calling for a county resolution demanding a ceasefire? Because this war has brought violations of basic human rights that made Jews and Muslims less safe in our community and around the world. On campuses and in the streets, this war is testing families and friendships, breeding generations of anti-Semites and Islamophobes whose hatred will haunt us for decades. You cannot close your eyes and pretend you don't see.
Thank you. Next up is Ciel Gladstein.
Hi, thank you. Well, along with some others, I am supporting the Human Rights Commission resolution and want to speak on the issue of a permanent ceasefire and the underlying issues which seem to fuel people's misunderstanding of the situation in Gaza and the West Bank. From the beginning of the creation of the Israeli state, Zionism has been at the heart of how this state would function, and the reality of Zionism is that it relies upon the falsified dehumanization of Palestinian people and the need to occupy and control their movements in their land so that the Jewish people will be safe. The fact is that just like in America, we have been taught anti-blackness to justify racism, In Israel, Zionism creates the same narrative so that people fear the Palestinians, and that lays the groundwork for taking over and killing off the Palestinian people. I feel that it is important to understand and help us see Palestinians as human and understand why this bombardment is not a solution. The mass murder of Palestinian people is not a solution to Jewish people in Israel wanting to be safe. It will just create more resistance, because what people would not resist their oppressors? Imagine for a minute if you were in Gaza right now. Would you not want the oppression to end? Would you not want the bombing to end, the siege to end, the checkpoints in West Bank to end, the mass arrests of children to end, the mass killings of children to end? Would you not want the illegal settlements to end so that you could live in your home in peace? The conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism is very harmful. And as a Jewish American, I deeply believe that Zionism is anti-Semitic, and it does not keep anyone safe. It just is a colonial project which has been killing and aggressively oppressing Palestinian people for 75 years. The safety of Jewish people is important, just like everyone's safety is important, and human rights should be equal human rights for all humans, not just some. Ceasefire is the next step in stopping this genocide, and then I hope solutions include the right of return for Palestinian people and equal rights, along with Jewish people, in Israel, Palestine. To conclude, I do not consent to my tax dollars going to killing people in Gaza or West Bank or anywhere, or any war for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. I do just want to mention that we have a couple of people that are on Zoom that are going to speak too. I just want to let you know we didn't forget you, but we have a lot of people here in chambers as well, so we will get to you.
None of them have arrived yet.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Glad you're here in person. Next up, Mona Sulzman.
Tonight, others here have or will list and describe for you a vast quantity of unspeakable atrocities committed by Israel these past 3 months. Israel's inhumane crimes and repeated violations of international law and human rights are made possible by the U.S. Passing this resolution is the minimum, the absolute minimum that you can do to immediately mitigate and hopefully stop this catastrophic genocidal ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza. I say minimum, because beyond this urgent call for ceasefire, we need to end once and for all this U.S. imperialist proxy project, apartheid Israel, and U.S.'s lifeblood support for Israel. So I ask you to at least do this tiny, tiny minimum and pass this resolution. I was a founding member of the Ithaca Reform Temple to Kunva and worked there as well professionally for 10 years as creator of their adult education program and co-teacher of that program. As a teacher in their religious school for kids, as a leader of worship services, as cantorial soloist for high holidays, and I officiated at many life cycle events. I taught for 8 years in Ithaca's Temple Bethel Religious School and continue to be a member of Temple Bethel. Beyond Ithaca, I'm a graduate of Elat Chaim's 2-year Jewish meditation leadership program. Judaism is not Zionism. Criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. As county legislators, you are charged with, among many other tasks, to work out the county budget and balance the needs of the community with available financial resources. You surely confront and consider what the federal government and state contribute or not to the county and the entities within it in terms of funding, grants, loans, etc. The U.S.'s ever-increasing gargantuan financial support for Israel is money that is crucially needed here for our crumbling infrastructure, affordable childcare, healthcare, education, housing, climate disaster prevention, and much more. New York State grants nonprofit, tax-exempt, charitable status to organizations such as the Central Fund for Israel that make possible the establishment and maintenance of Israel's settlements on the West Bank and Jerusalem, despite the fact that these settlements are in violation of international law and the pogrom-style crimes of violence routinely committed by the settlers are not certainly charitable. The city of Ithaca recently and once again allowed Cornell to not pay its fair share. Cornell's 10-year New York City partnership with Israel's Technion, a branch of which is located on the Ithaca campus, makes not only Cornell but Ithaca and Tompkins County complicit in Israel's genocidal ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Technion is a world leader in weapons and surveillance technology and ensures its profits by successfully testing its products on Palestinians. To end, as a Jew, I say not in my name. As an American, I say not in my name. As a citizen for 35 years of Tompkins County, I ask you to join me and the others here and say not in our names. Please pass this resolution without undue delay. Thank you.
Next up is Ruth Yarrow.
Good evening. I'd like to thank many people who have come out to speak on this issue, and I want to thank the legislators who are sitting here and listening to us. And I can tell you're listening when you're looking at us. I was going to say many of the things that have already been said, so instead I will ask a few questions that I think help put the whole thing in geographical perspective. I'd like to ask my legislators what your guess is about the area of Tompkins County compared to the area of the Gaza Strip. Is there anybody brave enough to make a guess?
So in general, we do not engage in debate during this. This is a chance for the public to make statements to
Okay,
us.
thank you.
Thank
I
you.
will tell you then that the Gaza Strip is less than a third of the size of Tompkins County. In that space, there are 20 times the number of people that live in Tompkins County. In the last few months, over 22,000, as you've heard, Palestinians have been killed by bombardment from Israel. We on the Human Rights Commission, deplore the loss of life of anyone, and we certainly deplored what happened with the attack from Hamas, and we deplore what's happening now in Gaza. Just think that 70% of the deaths in Gaza are women and children. Take it to heart. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next up is Risa Lieberwitz.
Great, thank you very much. My name's Risa Lieberwitz. I've been a resident in Tompkins County for many years, as well as a professor of labor and employment law at the ILR School at Cornell for many years as well. And I speak, as others have, urging you to adopt the resolution by the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission. And I want to emphasize certain things that you've already heard, starting with a reminder that this is within this legislative body's power to do, and it is the right thing for you to do, to exercise your power in this way. It is both right and appropriate that the county legislature calls on the President of the United States and the U.S. Congress to demand a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and to demand humanitarian aid that is so needed in that area. And I want to emphasize 2 points that you've already heard about so eloquently from other residents of this area. First is, why should we do this? Why should you do this? Why is it right and appropriate and within your power? Number one is the impact of the U.S. federal government actions on Tompkins County. There's the funding issue that you've already heard about, that our tax dollars go from our community to support the federal government's use of that money for military support to Israel, which is committing such atrocities in Gaza. And so this not only is the use of our tax dollars, but as you've also heard, it affects the way in which funding priorities are carried out by the federal government and how they affect us locally. There's also the impact not only on funding, but as importantly on the human rights in our community. And I want to emphasize the impact on issues of the ability and the interference with ability to exercise equal rights based on ethnicity, nationality, religion, and political beliefs. There's a lot of fear in our community among people who wish to speak out. And there's fear by those who have the courage to speak out on these issues. I see that on the Cornell campus. There's a fear of repercussion and retaliation for those who wish to speak out on issues of Palestinian rights. And so we are all, finally, I would emphasize, implicated in these issues. We're implicated in U.S. actions in relation to Israel and Gaza, and taking that to heart, as so many people have urged, means that we must act because we are implicated, and we must act in the face of that, using your power in a courageous way to speak for a permanent ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Barbara Chasin.
I'm a Jewish American, and I want to speak in support of this resolution, as others have. To date, over 22,000 Gazans have been killed, including at least 8,000 children, several thousand more than are in the Ithaca School District, to give some perspective. Another approximately 50,000 people are physically wounded. These figures do not capture the whole horror of the ongoing assaults, turning the densely populated enclave into a place of ongoing hunger, thirst, homelessness, and with a destroyed infrastructure. We can expect the psychological toll on survivors will last for a very long time and will be difficult to estimate. Our government, as people have pointed out, is very complicit in this ongoing assault, supplying Israel with billions of dollars and with weapons. Regarding the weapons, I would like to quote two recent New York Times articles. Israel is believed to be carrying out its bombardment of Gaza largely with American-manufactured bombs, nearly half of which are unguided munitions, according to U.S. intelligence assessment. And these weapons include, quote, 2,000-pound bombs that many military experts say are unsuitable for densely populated areas. Against this backdrop, it is truly heartening to see the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission passing a strong and unequivocal resolution calling for a permanent ceasefire, release of hostages, humanitarian aid for Gaza, and respect for human rights laws. The Commission notes also that U.S. financial support for Israel and other military spending negatively impacts Tompkins County residents, diverting tax dollars that could provide for urgent human needs. I join with others in asking that our county legislature join the Commission in its call, setting an example for other elected officials, particularly Senators Schumer and Gillibrand, to do the same. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next up, I think it says Richard Fromm. Is that correct? I have a little trouble reading the last name here. Okay.
Sorry, I guess I'm the one with the bad handwriting. My name is Dick Franke. I'm a resident of Tompkins County, and I'm a member of the Joint Local Ithaca Committee for Justice in Palestine and the Ithaca chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace, although I'm not Jewish. I'm here today to urge the Tompkins County Legislature to endorse and promote the draft resolution of the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission entitled A Unified Call for a Ceasefire in Gaza, Urgent Humanitarian and Local Imperatives. I base my appeal to you in part on the testimony of Avril Benoit, Executive Director of Doctors Without Borders, who made the following observations in her December 4th open letter to President Biden. She said, "The U.S. government has a responsibility as a partner and ally of the Israeli government to ensure that its support is not used to kill civilians, attack hospitals and medical staff, destroy cities, and forcibly displace civilians." She continued, "Medics in Gaza are exhausted and overwhelmed by the scale of human suffering they experience every day. Our teams throughout Gaza recount scenes of horror in the hospitals, dead bodies everywhere, people with crushed limbs rescued from collapsed buildings, and orphaned children with severe burns covering most of their tiny bodies. They describe patients screaming in pain because there's not enough anesthesia, and every day they go to work for their patients. They can't go on like this," she said. "No one in Gaza can go on like this. We need a sustained ceasefire now."
Thank you. Next up is Barbara Regenspan.
Happy New Year, and thank you for the work that all of you do. It's a kind of work that requires capacities I don't have, and I appreciate your work a lot, especially the new focus on affordable housing that I know is one of the most complicated issues that we're all facing. Anyway, thank you. I agree completely with the resolution that's, been described so well. And I'm especially delighted about the idea of building global democracy by moving beyond the strictly local in how we think about local interests, needs, and investments. And people have made such a good case for how wrong it is to be spending money on military aid for Israel at this time when it's being used so horrendously. I oppose military aid for everywhere all the time, but that's besides the point. I wanted to say two things that haven't been said yet. One is that when we think about local interest, one of the not obvious ways that we've been impoverished by this horrific war is that from the loss of Palestinian voices in the media, those voices that have been silenced by increased Islamophobia, which has led to firings and the breach of contracts with Palestinian journalists. This is one of the not obvious losses. People have spoken so eloquently about the more obvious ones. I wanted to mention that. But the other thing I wanted to do was to be really specific about how some progressive Jews feel in the ways that are difficult to articulate because they're embarrassing for progressives to face. So I just want to be honest about this because I suspect I'm speaking for some Jews who aren't here tonight, and I am an affiliated Jew. I've not hesitated to call myself an anti-Zionist Jew in the past, but the fear that has arisen in the past few months is that I could be colluding with the call for the annihilation of Jewish Israelis under a new uncertainty about what anti-Zionism means. I just wanted to state that anyway. Yeah, I hope you'll pass this resolution. It's very important.
Thank you. Next up is Genevieve Rand.
Hello, everybody. I'm really proud that this resolution from the County Human Rights Commission is up for consideration, and I really sincerely hope that somebody on the legislature sponsors it and that you adopt it as the Tompkins County Legislature. I think it's really deeply necessary for communities across America, just like ours, to stand on the side of peace, given the global military power that our nation wields. And I think it's important for us to consider this here because as a nation, we need to learn from our mistakes. A lot of us in this room, at this table, in the seats, came of political age, and I say a lot of us because it went on for so long, during the US's funding and participation in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we heard a lot of the same rhetoric there, that you know, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, we're just supporting war as long as it takes to stamp out the bad guys, and if we want it done, we need to throw as much military power as possible at it. And some civilians may die in the process, but that's just the price of justice. And put bluntly, that didn't work. I could be a lot more blunt, but it didn't work. We killed millions of innocent civilians, and we completely failed for decades at overthrowing fundamentalist authoritarian rule that, by the way, we helped create in the first place through decades of political and financial interference in the region. Today, the decades of military occupation and oppression and apartheid regime in Palestine is producing the same results. We are hearing that if we just do a little bit more military escalation, if we just do a little bit more authoritarian repression, if we fund inhumane violence just a little bit longer, we'll stamp out the bad guys and then we can pull back. It's the same rhetoric we heard for 20 years. It made things worse, and we need to learn from that. Over the past several months, this war has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians and thousands of Israelis. This is not helping anyone. It's killing horrific numbers of people, and our taxes are funding it. We need to learn from our own history and speak out for peace in the form of a ceasefire, and that's the minimum. There's a lot more to do after that, but that's what we can do immediately. Standing up to pro-war rhetoric has always taken bravery. It can be very tempting to fall into the hawking and the rush towards violence, but we need to do it. I bet a lot of you in this room, at this table, wish that more of America had done so 20 years ago and that millions of lives had been spared. And you, as people in these seats now, have a chance to take the step that you wish your government had taken back then. So I encourage you to support this resolution and adopt it as a county legislature.
The next up is Beth Harris.
Hello. My name is Beth Harris, and I am a Jewish resident of the town of Ithaca. I support the resolution that's been presented by the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission. And I want you to know that across the United States, from Oregon to Rhode Island, from Georgia to Michigan, local jurisdictions are calling for a ceasefire and the protection of human rights. I am actually quite upset and angry that those who represent me, from the county legislature to the U.S. Congress to the U.S. President, have enabled Israel's war crimes against Palestinians, both by their silence and blaming those war crimes on the Palestinians themselves. On October 17th, I was with you all, and Greg Measy withdrew his resolution to raise an Israeli flag in the chambers until the conflict ended. Measy stated, quote, "This resolution that I originally submitted was in response to the terrorist attack on October 7th and had to express our support and sympathy for those affected. I realize that we need to take a moment to rethink a more nuanced resolution, calling for a ceasefire from all sides, a release of hostages, and peace in the region." The kind of resolution that Measy suggested is precisely what the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission is offering today. I want to stress the urgency of an immediate permanent ceasefire and commend the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission for its commitment to its mission of the protection of human rights, which is shared within the purview of the Tompkins County Human Rights Office. Though people have already mentioned the urgency and emergency in Gaza now. And this is being recognized around the world. Just recently, as was mentioned, South Africa has brought a case to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, condemning Israel for its genocide. And just last, I want to close by making it clear that silence on the devastating assault on Gaza does not support your constituents in Tompkins County who support human rights principles and oppose genocide, whether we are Jewish, Muslim, Israeli, or Palestinians. Support the human rights for all.
Thank you. Next up is Liza De Profetis. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that well.
Hi, I'm a recent transplant to Tompkins County. I've lived here for just under a year. I didn't really have remarks prepared as I just found out about this last minute, but I found it really important to add my voice in support of this resolution calling for a ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Eric Chaffetz. All right.
My name is Eric Chaffetz. I am a Jew. I have a daughter and 3 grandchildren who are Israeli citizens and live in Tel Aviv and are anti-Zionists. So I point to the fact that all Israelis are not Zionists, as all Jews are not Zionists. I'm a professor at Cornell University where I teach in the American Indian and Indigenous Studies program, which includes my work on Palestine, Israel, and its comparison with the settler colonialism that has usurped power here from Native people and usurped power from the Palestinians, who are the indigenous people of Palestine. And I think we ought to take that into account. The connection between Tompkins County and Palestine is the following, and the connection is genocide. Tompkins County rests on land taken in a genocide from the Guyacono people and from the Haudenosaunee people and from Native Americans in general. Here we sit, the Guyacono people are here, they have no land left from that taking, which was taken by force and fraud in the Revolutionary War. Likewise, Cornell University was founded, the money that financed the founding of Cornell University and sustained it for a long time was taken from land stolen from Native Americans in the West Coast and the Midwest in the form of land scrip through the Morrill Act of 1862, which Cornell sold, still has $70 million in the bank from that taking, close to 1 million acres. So Cornell's connection with Technion which is instrumental in perpetrating the genocide that is going on in Gaza. Its connection to the genocide that's taking place here and is still taking place in Native America is an important, important connection and a reason to stand up for this resolution. Who would not want a ceasefire anyway? I don't understand that. Okay, that boggles my mind. Who would not be for a ceasefire in the face of over 20,000 Palestinians, mostly non-combatants, and over 7,000 children who've been slaughtered? And for what reason? Okay, I think if you listen to the Israeli cabinet, the reason is to get rid of Palestinians, pure and simple. It has nothing to do with Hamas, which they're not going to get rid of anyway. All right, in fact, they're going to create more Hamases in the wake of this. But who would not be for a ceasefire in the face of all this carnage? Finally, what I want to say, and that hasn't been mentioned, this could lead to a wider war, folks. There is already contact with Hezbollah, conflict with Hezbollah. Iran is involved in obvious ways in this, and there are nuclear warheads at stake here. Israel has nuclear warheads, and Israel is urging the United States implicitly, if not explicitly behind closed doors, to start a war with Iran, which it wants. And believe me, folks, if that happens, we're all finished. So that's a reason for voices to be heard, not to be silent. Thank you, and thank everybody for their comments here. I appreciate them.
I believe the next name on the paper here is John Doe.
Along with others, I would strongly urge you to pass the draft resolution. The cultural psychosis and mass suspension of disbelief around the ongoing massacre in Palestine, which is sold to us as defensive action, is mind-blowing. It might be fine for the Israeli government to claim regret for innocent loss of life and so-called collateral damage, and that sadly this is fully necessitated by the October 7th attacks, complete with its Hellfire missiles that explode with spinning discs designed to maim and dismember. But the claim that all this carnage, with much more to come, is a defensive action and fully necessary doesn't hold water, as Israeli military has reduced significant parts of Gaza to rubble, killing thousands several times before. There have been 5 Israeli-Gaza wars since 2008, involving thousands and thousands of Palestinian deaths, as well as abject cruelty using banned white phosphorus weapons. They call it mowing the lawn. I won't even get into the 2 intifadas, the multiple war crimes against Lebanon, with thousands killed, or the Nakba of 1948, that Ehud Barak made illegal for Israeli citizens to even talk about or acknowledge. All the while, Gazans are being systematically starved, as well as having water cut off and other things I could mention. They call it putting them on a diet. Each of us must review the history and not get our information from mainstream media. This is really our work to do, and there are plenty of good books and online resources. We have to figure out for ourselves if sources like the New York Times, with many journalists with various agendas, are entirely trustworthy. We're going to have to figure out for ourselves if an apparent hijacking of the Me Too movement, alleging rape against Israeli women hostages, is credible. If the intensity of the allegations matches the intensity of the massacres, and cynically, might even amount to a form of cheerleading for the massacre. Consider watching web-based shows like Al Jazeera and sites like the Electronic Intifada and Mondoweiss. Now, if that's bias, I'll sign up for more of that, because I've been watching these sites for the last 80 nights, because I refuse to turn away from this trauma. It's the very least I can do to be a witness. And we can learn a lot from it if we can stomach it. Each of us here is going to have to decide exactly how compromised and complicit we can stand to be. We don't require open admissions of fear of retribution for speaking out about the massacre against defenseless people in Palestine. We well understand your fear, our fear of speaking out. After all, part of the fear is not being able to speak about our fear. And I'll just close with, it's way beyond an excruciating moral dilemma that each of us must wage internally. Slogans from recent movements, silence is violence, silence is complicity. These slogans haunt us now.
Next up is Marianne Grady Flores.
So before the clock starts, I just want to say I'm not feeling well, and I did try to sign up last night, and I don't know why I never got the email with the link. So anyway.
We will look into it, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm here, Marianne Grady Flores, as a City of Ithaca resident for almost 29 years now, and my family's been here 50 years. I'm also with the Ithaca Catholic Workers and also with the Committee for Justice in Palestine and JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, even though I'm a Catholic. And you heard me back, as Beth described back on October 17th, I described my relationship with the Jewish community, the beloved Jewish community that I've been connected to since I was a child, including my beloved Holocaust neighbors, or survivors of the Holocaust, I should say. So a couple of things. One is that the truth is being targeted. Our New York Times and the BBC did not care to report that South Africa was bringing a case to the International Court of Justice, which is the highest court in the UN body. I want to read, can I have a show of hands? How many of you watch Democracy Now? And I don't only ask you guys, I'm asking everybody. So I missed it this morning because I wasn't feeling good. But I was so grateful to know that Francis Boyle, professor and international law expert, Francis Boyle was invited on the show today. And I invite you to go back and look in the archives of today's show from this morning. But I'll just say this. The International Court of Justice in The Hague, or South Africa, has filed a case at the main judicial body for the UN, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. I believe South Africa will win in order against Israel to cease and desist from committing all acts of genocide against the Palestinians, says Francis Boyle, an international human rights lawyer who won 2 requests at the ICJ under the Genocide Convention of 1948 for the provisional protection on behalf of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina against Yugoslavia. Boyle says Israel has a history of listening to the United States orders to stop its assaults on occupied Palestinian territories. We here in the United States of America have the power to stop this. And it does take our collective voice, as has been said so eloquently before me. But I do want to say, we're not getting the full truth. How many of us have time? I know many of you are working full-time jobs, and it is hard. It takes time to look at this god-awful truth of what's going on there. It is so horrible. I'll just finish with this and say that in looking at, you know how, well, it's New Year's. All the journalists are saying, well, what's the year in review? And looking at past years of review, the year, the winter, the January 1st, right before the world realized that the genocide was going on during the Holocaust, people's eyes were closed. People didn't realize. We have a responsibility to act because this genocide is the first one that has ever been televised
live.
Marion, if you could
It's available
conclude your
to
remarks.
us. So we need to watch. We need to look. Over 100 journalists in Gaza have been murdered. The Israelis have every one of their cell phones and can target them. In 20 years of the Vietnam War, only 68 journalists were killed. This is within 70 days. We're up to day 87. The truth needs to be heard. We all have to look at it.
Thank you, Marianne. Okay, if you would be willing to use that microphone, the public health person in me is going to wipe down that microphone. No, don't be sorry. You self-identified, so I thought I would just take the opportunity to wipe it down. Phoebe Brown, you're next up. If you don't mind going to that microphone. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year's. And I first want to start by saying I am one of those people who've been afraid, really fearful as a black woman to speak out because I didn't want to say the wrong thing, so I've been saying all I want to see is peace in the Middle East. As someone who have sat down last night and was speaking to a friend, I thought about, and I was told to watch the results of what happened to people in slavery. And I said, it's impossible. We started talking, I said, it's impossible for me not to come out and speak, right? Whatever the consequences behind what I say tonight, because there's always some consequences. What I want to say is I support the Human Rights Commission for this resolution. I think it's very important. I also want to say that as someone who sits around and watches how we galvanize when something happens, right? This is not our first time looking at this. We know of a history of this, but what really touched me last night, and I'm gonna play this, and I'm gonna say, black people are still fighting for equality and equity. Let's not forget. So, come on. You have to hear it if it's just a little bit. This is a young 14-year-old kid in Palestine.
I'm exhausted. Last night I couldn't sleep, but when I did, I could hear bombs in my dreams. Nightmare situation. How could they be so evil, making martyrs out of children and innocent people? We expect the bombs, not knowing where next. Huddle in the corner of my room, trying to protect my little brother as the building shakes like it's possessed, but nothing stronger than the will of the oppressed. I bomb back with my lyrics and rights, living the times trying to break the Palestinian minds. What's hiding in the clouds hanging over my head? My dad risks his life outside to buy bread. The fourth war in my 12th year. At this stage I'm numb, though I haven't feel scared. There's nothing I can do in this case to stay safe. I'm brave, even though this house could be my grave. I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing is ever changing. That's life under an occupation. I want freedom for the population. 2 million.
I don't know if y'all heard that loud, but that broke my heart. This young boy was 12 years old when he wrote this in 2020, a while ago, and that just broke my heart, and I just knew that I needed to say something. I needed to know that I'm in support and peace around the world, right? And I do really believe that it's not just about us sitting in here and coming out when something really drastic touches our heart. It's about every day practicing peace, every day looking for someone who needs you, right? We have a Gaza Strip right here in Ithaca. Don't ever forget it. And we have people dying in our communities. So we have to really just not come out and flood all these places and march and stuff. We have to do something every single day. And I think for me, sometimes I feel like I failed the next 7 generations. Thank you.
All right, next up, Ewing.
I'm Elmer Ewing, maybe the last speaker on this topic, I'm not sure.
No.
I've lived in the town of Ithaca since 1954. I was 23 years old when I came. You can do the math. I'll just tell you, I'm 92. I've been here before, speaking before the legislature. I thought it was an important topic. It was against fracking. We made a lot of noise about that then. Actually, one guy that was here then. Anyway, this I think is more important. I thought fracking was really important, but this is more important. I have 5 children, 10 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, and 2 on the way of great-grandchildren. We have in our family Jewish members of the family, Muslim members, Catholic, Protestant, and even Hindu. We're kind of a little United Nations. I get Christmas holiday greetings, I should say, from a dear friend living in a kibbutz where I spent many, many happy days. I exchanged holiday greetings with my Muslim friend in Egypt and another one in Tunisia. In our family, we have learned to respect one another, to get along with one another, support one another, love one another, be at peace with one another. It's a rich experience. We wish the world could be that way. It isn't. But maybe this is a step I can speak for, at least a little step in that direction. I urge you to pass the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I think it is Nana McAllister.
Hi, my name is Joanna McAllister, and I'm a grad student at Cornell. And today I'm very strongly in favor of today's ceasefire resolution, and I will speak to a few of the ways that Cornell and Cornellians have been forced into an ethically compromised partnership with Technion, deepening our complicity with the military occupation, ethnic cleansing, and ongoing genocide in Palestine. And I pulled a few of my resources today from Cornell Students for Justice in Palestine's 2016 zine on this topic. The Cornell Tech campus in New York City is a technology-focused graduate school founded in a joint partnership with the Technion Israel Institute of Technology. Technion is implicated in the ongoing military occupation of Palestine and genocide in Gaza by developing weapons technology for the Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, specifically bulldozers and drones that have been used by Israel in Gaza to murder civilians. Cornell's partnership with Technion came about through a series of secret meetings with Technion in which the Faculty Senate was not consulted. The construction of Cornell Tech was made possible through an initiative by Michael Bloomberg, then mayor of New York City, offering $100 million in city funds and extensive tracts of public land to build an applied technology campus on Roosevelt Island in Manhattan. Cornell has proven here that it has the funds to give back to Ithaca, yet it refuses to invest in the city that it calls home, and instead invest its millions in apartheid Israel, as written by Amnesty International and many other organizations, and genocide in Gaza. Since the creation of the State of Israel after the Nakba in 1948, the Technion Israel Institute of Technology has played a key role in developing technologies that facilitate Israel's military occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, largely with the help of Israeli defense technology companies Rafael Advanced Defense Systems and Albert Systems. Armed surveillance drones, undetectable spy robots, facial recognition software, and behavior-metric technology to identify users on the internet are all the self-proclaimed achievements of the Technion Center. These achievements highlight sophisticated surveillance and military structures developed specifically to contain and surveil Palestinian civilians. Moreover, while the research priorities planned for the shared Cornell Technion campus are organized under the headings of connective media and healthier life, Technion's historic role in the military occupation of Palestine raises disturbing questions about the relationship between academic inquiry and settler colonial domination. It could be objected that Cornell only participates in development of peaceful technologies, but as Professor Eric Chaffetz, who spoke earlier tonight, has already said, one might also see this as a case of the right hand not knowing what the left is doing, or complicity and denial. I'm almost done. Students at Cornell Tech are invited to pioneer the future of technology, but are they ever asked, future for whom and at what cost? There is no peace without justice, and all people have the right to freedom and safety. I support today's ceasefire resolution, an end to Israel's occupation of Palestine and genocide in Gaza, and a permanent diplomatic solution that guarantees both Palestinians and Israelis are free from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea.
Joel, thank you. Next up is Peter Salton.
I didn't want to come here, I really didn't, but I'm a first-generation American Jew. My parents were fortunate to escape Germany and Austria in World War II. They met in New York City in 1948. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Adolf Hitler. Yeah, digest that. I came later. My uncle was so fearful after surviving World War II at 15, he became a Catholic. White colonizer? No, I grew up in Belmont, Mass., the seat of the John Birch Society. When I went to my friend's house at 8 years old, the very home of the John Birch Society president, his grandma asked, "What's he doing here?" There is no room for an organization, a terrorist organization, that drags the raped, dismembered bodies of females in the backs of Jeeps, surrounded by green, red, and black flags, waving their dismembered parts in exhilaration. There's no room for the use of human shields as a tactic to legitimize yourself in any way. I feel sorry for the Palestinian citizens that are there. Why don't they get rid of these people? What are you doing? Half of the Jews on the planet were killed in the Second World War. Atrocities have been committed everywhere in this, and it's unfortunate. But Hamas and other terrorist groups for the past 3/4 of a century have been hijacking planes, murdering Olympic teams, and on and on and on. There is just no end to the list of terrorist acts by Hamas, their predecessors, their successors. No, we're not going to get rid of them all, but maybe for 20 years, maybe for 20 years things will settle down a little bit. Yeah, that sucks to say that. It's a war. Significantly, none of the neighboring Arab states want anything to do with helping the Palestinians and the Israelis, because to help either one of them brings Hamas and the other terrorist organizations in. Anything that endorses the terrorist status quo is a non-starter for me, and I don't want to see any of it in any resolution that this county board passes. This resolution, I appreciate the hard work that went into it, but I don't see the word terrorist anywhere in the four corners of this thing. Where is it? To condemn all this other stuff without condemning terrorism is weak, and it's a weak resolution.
Peter, your 3 minutes are up if you have any concluding remarks.
No.
Okay. Next up is Ellen Grady.
Thank you so much for all your time and your attention. As Ruth said, it's really helpful to see all your faces, and I'm glad to be here tonight. And I'm really nervous about talking. I know some of you might think that's a funny thing to say, but coming from me. Basically, I'm here to ask you to support this. I am here in support of the resolution for a permanent ceasefire. My big question would be, why wouldn't we ask for a ceasefire? It's the only way we're going to figure something out, and the killing has to stop. And yesterday, I had the privilege of walking with my grandchildren in Taganic Park and up the gorge, and it was a beautiful day, and I'm a lucky person, and I just couldn't help seeing all those children that were on the path too. It was great how it was being used. You know, the state park had fires all along the way. It was beautiful, and I just kept thinking about the children in Gaza, and you know, they said, move here and you'll be safe and we won't bomb you. And then they were bombed, and they said, no, move here and we won't bomb you. And those kids, like, where's the water? Where's the clean water? Where's the food? The New York Times yesterday, the headline was that said, hang on a second, I just want to make sure I say it right. It's a daily struggle. 90% of Gazans say they regularly go without food for a whole day. That's children. I was just walking with those kids yesterday, and it's like, okay, here's a snack for now, because I know, you're getting hungry, you're getting a little cranky. Can you imagine walking around Gaza? Move here. No, you won't get bombed here. No. Actually, we're going to bomb here. Now you got to move over here. And that's been going on for 80-something days now. For God's sake, how many days can that keep going? And have you seen the pictures of the children? And it goes on day after day after day after day, and you open this up and you go, oh my God, I can't look at it anymore. It's just breaking our hearts. And that's our hearts. Can you imagine them? And can you imagine the mothers and the grandmothers? And so I just want to say, please, it's the least we could do for those children. To just say, please, a ceasefire. It's the only sane thing for us to do at this point. Thank you.
Have one member of the public who's on Zoom that wanted to speak. Brian Eden.
Thanks, Dan. Most of you know that I would be there today in person if I were not an active COVID. So I, of course, do support strongly the resolution. I've been working since October 7th to promote programs of ethnic reconciliation. I've worked intermittently with groups of Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews on programs to promote community reconciliation for the past 60 years. A permanent state of conflict cannot be tolerated. Unfortunately, this important civil society responsibility receives no governmental support in Israel. It's been well established that military solutions to conflicts of national liberation are not possible. We only need to rely on the U.S. for a reference case. In the 1965 to 75 period, there were, in the China bombing campaign, 7.6 million tons of explosives dropped on that small country, or 3 times what was dropped in World War II, with approximately 2.5 million Vietnamese killed and 58,000 U.S. service personnel. Despite the huge number of casualties, the Vietnamese forces continued to strengthen during the war. The last image that many may recall from that conflict is of folks climbing up a ladder on top of the U.S. Embassy and onto a helicopter to escape the invading Vietnamese forces. Whether it be Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan, U.S. military authorities often are supremely confident that their strategy will be successful. To build confidence, they frequently cite seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. However, here, U.S. authorities have argued with Israel that Gaza is unlikely to eliminate Hamas by this particular strategy. So alternative paths of conflict resolution must be explored unless Netanyahu is successful in his plan to have Gazans voluntarily migrate. Israel's neighbors are unalterably opposed to creating new refugee camps on their borders. The U.S., as well as many other countries, are struggling with immigration issues. Palestinians and Israelis will need to identify a means of peaceful coexistence on the same land base. So I've worked with 3 groups, civil society groups from Israel. One of them is called Oasis of Peace. It's a small village south of Tel Aviv with about, I'd say, it's about 70 families, and it's an equal number of Arab families and Israeli families. And this has been in existence for 50 years. And it's been really stressful for them lately because the Israeli families, many of the members of those families have been called up for duty. So here they're living in community with other Arab folks, and so they have to have a dialogue every Friday, once a week they have a dialogue to try to work through the stresses of this. We've had people in Ithaca, Noam Schuster, who was a graduate of the school system in Oasis for Peace, attended Brandeis and spoke in Ithaca in 2009. So I also worked with the Mecca Middle Eastern Children's Alliance on, they brought, water filtration systems into Gaza, which is a very polluted area, not only heavily industrialized, a lot of pollution and a lot of salt infiltration. And, I was a member of the Finger Lakes community of humanistic Judaism on the board for 10 years, and we raised funds.
Brian, your 3 minutes is up if you want to make some concluding remarks.
No, that's fine. I'm just saying we need to, now under these circumstances, we need to strengthen the civil society groups, and because they're very much needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that concludes everyone that we had sign up to speak. We are, as you know, there's a little more to do on this topic, but there's a few small business items between now and then. The next thing on the agenda is that we have privilege of the floor for municipal officials. And I think Phoebe Brown might be the only municipal official I know in the room. Phoebe, if you would like to say anything in terms of your seat on the Common Council, you are welcome to. You don't have to, it's up to you. You probably were not prepared for this.
I wasn't prepared, but I always like to talk.
All right.
Thanks again for inviting me up. I'm the only one. I didn't know, I hadn't even planned on coming, but what I will say is I am excited once again to be on the city council. I look forward to this young group. I think I'm gonna be the senior on the council, and that's all good too. But I'm really excited, and I look forward to working more closely with you guys, really closely. I don't feel like we've done that much work together before, but this time I look really forward. I'm really, really excited. Hochul just signed the bill for reparations research, which is near and dear to my heart, so I look forward to that. But I think we have a really amazing group of young people and elders coming together to do the work that we've been tasked to do. So I'll see you all around.
Good, thank you. Very good for nothing prepared. Are there any other municipal officials in the room? No. Okay. For my chair's report, the only thing I want to mention is that the committee's assignments that we've all been in during 2023 will continue through the end of January, and the new committee assignments will start February 1st, so everyone should continue in their roles that they've been in for a few more weeks. And there are no chair's appointments. Okay, so next up is the Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission is an advisory committee, an advisory board to the Tompkins County Legislature on the subject of human rights. And as we all know, the Human Rights Commission has put together a resolution that they've sent to us. And in that capacity, they were invited to come here and read the resolution and to say a few more words if they want. And representing the Human Rights Commission is the chair of the commission, Pei Soyinka Arowele. And if you're welcome to stay at that mic if you want, or if you're welcome to come up front, your choice. And I believe Ruth Yarrow from the commission is also here, yeah? Okay. So you're welcome to sit at the chair at the desk if you want, whatever you'd like. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you so much for having us. And thank you to all the members of the community who have spoken. My name is Pei Soyinka Arowele, and you did a fantastic job trying to pronounce it. My colleague, Ruth Yarrow, and other colleagues from the commission are also here. Ruth actually helped to inspire the notion of the resolution by the Human Rights Commission. I understand the concerns about tackling this issue. It's one of the most emotional, highly politicized, potentially divisive, and sensitive issues with serious policy disagreements across the world. When it was first proposed as the one-sentence resolution, the Commission debated it very strongly, working through every point of concern and weakness and disagreement, reworking the document thoroughly, doing our research until it finally met almost unanimous approval. We asked ourselves, was there any value to a statement of this nature? What are the limits of our purview and that of the legislature in responding to a global issue? What was the relevance to local county issues? Was there precedence nationally? We asked whether we were being selective. After all, there are other conflicts. Armenia, Sudan, with 7 million displaced and 20 million facing acute food insecurity. How do we avoid bias and reflect the strong sense that there had been atrocities, certainly by Hamas as well as the Israeli government? Well, we believe that there were answers to these problems and concerns, and that we could tackle them systematically in the resolution. The legislature and the commission would not always be faced with the opportunity to address issues that are both local and global. Today, this international crisis is so deeply intertwined with our government, our lives, and the well-being of our community that we cannot hide in the safety of mute hope that somehow it will be resolved without all of us being part of it. For 3 months, I've sat with many students and anguished community members, president of the Muslim Students Association, Jewish students at Ithaca College and at Cornell, and even American students, one of whose brothers had been deployed recently to a naval ship in the Gulf and who couldn't sit in the classroom out of her deep anxiety. So this has entered into our spaces, psychologically, socially, economically, and otherwise. It's clear that college presidents are not sure how to proceed at the moment. Cornell has faced its own internal crisis. Department of Education is involved. This global has become very local. So we came to you today to ask you to speak on the behalf of human rights. It's the only anchor that can unite us all in a shared vision, a moral imperative, and a burden of responsibility that can transcend our political divides, our ideological differences, the troubled histories of the region, which will not be resolved in a simple resolution. But it's a call for us to do all we can to seek in our power to protect the sanctity of human life, to safeguard children, the vulnerable, the innocent, to kind of fight together for peace. So this resolution points to the potential influence that the United States government has in transforming the course of this humanitarian and rights crisis. Is it merely symbolic? Other local governments in the US have issued a call for ceasefire because, as they state, they believe it is part of the democratic scaffolding of the nation. Some have said they believe it is a responsibility to their elected representatives to communicate the issues from the grassroots to safeguard the agency and well-being of their constituents. Providence City Council declared that the federal government holds immense diplomatic power to save Israeli and Palestinian lives, and argued that the Rhode Island federal officials must therefore use the platform provided by their office to advocate for measures that will result in the least amount of death and violence. Other local governments that have passed a resolution include Richmond, Oakland, Berkeley, Long Beach, and Detroit City Councils, among others. So drawing on the words of advocates of the Long Beach City Council proclamation, we have come here to read the resolution to support a permanent ceasefire, release of hostages, because of, as they put it, that same sense of urgency and a plea for compassion. We seek your endorsement and your resolution as our legislature. This plea transcends complex political discourses. It is about fundamental human rights, that the tenets of and principles of humanity should not be obscured or overridden by the tenets of warfare. So I'll ask my colleague, Ruth, to help read out the resolution.
A unified call for a ceasefire in Gaza, urgent humanitarian and local imperatives. The Tompkins County Human Rights Commission, and we're using a format now that's used by the UN, so I originally wrote it with a lot of whereases and learned from Pei that that's old-fashioned, and so it sounds more conversational. Guided by the purpose and mission of the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission to encourage equality, discourage discrimination, and serve as an advisory board to the Office of Human Rights and to the Tompkins County Legislature, and noting that the Security Council of the United Nations reaffirmed on November 15, 2023, that, quote, all parties to conflicts must adhere to their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law, and recalling further all relevant international law, in particular the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the Convention of the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, gravely conscious that the actions of Hamas and of the government of Israel have impeded the fundamental rights of people to life, liberty, and security of persons as enshrined in Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, recognizing that the tax dollars of the residents of Tompkins County are part of the funds being used to provide military support to several countries overseas, including Ukraine, Jordan, Afghanistan, Egypt, and Israel, and recalling that over half, 56% of our tax dollars go to the military, excluding veterans' benefits, cutting into our ability to provide what the county residents need, such as low-income housing, adequate public transportation, and health care, and expressing deep concern that locally the crisis in Gaza is affecting our campuses and communities in Tompkins County in disturbing ways, including increased anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, polarization of opinions, mental health issues, and saturated support services, and expressing grave concern that 1,200 Israelis died in the attack by Hamas, with many others abducted and injured and their communities devastated, expressing grave concern that the death toll of Palestinians in Gaza from Israeli attacks now approaches 19,000, correct that to be over 22,000, including 7,000 children, with thousands more trapped under the rubble, noting that 80% of people in Gaza are now homeless, 9/10 now lack enough food and clean water, and 50% are starving, with the first starvation deaths recently reported, emphasizing that the medical system in Gaza is collapsing, and the World Health Organization has called for an end to the bombardment, expressing concern that in the absence of a ceasefire, Congress is currently considering legislation that would allocate an additional $14 billion for military assistance to Israel, expressing concern that the Biden administration has invoked the, quote, Arms Export Control Act emergency declaration to bypass Congress to provide Israel with ammunition for tanks, and the president just used that again, and deeply concerned about the negative impact, including the health and psychological consequences of the violence on the present and future well-being of children in the region, as well as on residents of our county. Therefore, strongly urges our county legislature to join other jurisdictions in calling on our president and Congress members to demand an immediate and sustainable ceasefire, release all hostages, unrestricted entry of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, the restoration of food, water, electricity, and medical supplies to Gaza, and the respect for international human rights law. Appreciates the role of the Tompkins County Legislature and further calls on it to provide strong leadership in proactively countering the various forms of fear, anxiety, intimidation, discrimination, and hate experienced by members of the local Jewish and Muslim communities. Urges the Tompkins County Legislature and other agencies to remind county residents of the resources available for those experiencing discriminatory treatment, including support from the Tompkins County Office of Human Rights. And finally, stresses the importance of all Tompkins County residents, agencies, educational institutions, and other authorities to do everything in their power to protect and support all county residents who may be experiencing various forms of discrimination related to this conflict, including increased anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. That's for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I do want to thank the Human Rights Commission for taking the time. I know you spent a lot of time doing this, working on it, and bringing it to us, and also to all the members of the public who spoke on this. The next item up on our agenda is for legislator privilege of the floor. So this is a time for legislators to speak and say what they wish. Who would like to speak on privilege of the floor? Travis Brooks.
Thank you. I almost called you Madam Chair because I'm so used to Shauna. Thank you. Mr. Chair, is that?
I would prefer Dan, if that's okay with everybody.
Good. Thank you, Dan. I do want to thank the members of the community that came out tonight to speak. I know speaking in front of folks and speaking on topics like this takes a lot of courage. And it's important for us to hear from the members of our community. I want to address two things pretty quickly here. I do know that many of us in this room have heard about this TCAT UPI thing for quite some time. Many people know that in the beginning when this grant was written that UPI was at the table. I would hope that F&I would invite UPI to come to a committee meeting to hear from them specifically on what's been happening and what's going on, because there is something there. And I think it's important for us to be involved. We're one of the three agencies or three groups that represent TCAT. So I think that's important. When I ran for office, I felt like I had 3 jobs. One was to use my voice to amplify the voice of those that I was elected to serve, to represent their needs and represent what they wanted to see happen in this community. Not necessarily what I felt was best, but for them, what they felt. And we've heard by and large from almost everybody that spoke tonight that they want to see us do something. They want to see us adopt. They want to see some sort of resolution based on what has come from the Human Rights Commission. And I agree with them. I think that what we should do, and I would be more than happy to offer my services, is for a few of us to get together with the folks from the Human Rights Commission and draft a resolution. I've heard people say that, you know, we're never going to get 14 people to agree, and we actually don't need 14 people to agree. We don't need more than 8 people to pass a resolution. We don't need everybody to agree on every piece of what's written in that resolution. There are some things that just seem to be what people want, and that's a ceasefire, right? And so I would like to put a motion on the floor, and tell me if I'm doing this wrong, because I usually don't do things like this, that a few of us get together on a task force. We did this for the jail. We've done this for opioid funds with the Human Rights Commission and draft something for the next meeting. This is something that's important. This is something that needs to be done quickly and not dragged out. We have a pretty good start with what the Human Rights Commission put together, and I would like to put that forward.
Travis, I would like to, if it's okay with you, hear from other legislators and reacting to what you said as well, because I don't know exactly the right format to do that. So if other people have thoughts about that, that could be part of the discussion. Would anybody else like to speak under privilege of the floor? Mike Sigler.
So I wrote this a couple weeks ago when we first got the Human Rights Commission report, and I sent it to my colleagues. I didn't send it to the Human Rights Commission, but I'll read it now, basically. Or at least I'll tell you about it now. And I want to thank the Tompkins County Human Rights Commission for their resolution calling for a ceasefire, but I find myself struggling to do so. Perhaps if there was more support for Israel immediately after October 7th, I would feel this was not a one-sided resolution. But the Human Rights Commission, among other agencies like the UN Women, failed to show their support. And because of that lack of empathy, this resolution, in my opinion, has several fatal flaws. Hamas has rejected calls for a ceasefire. That most recent call came from a plan from Egypt, where they called for the release of hostages and for Hamas to remove itself from leadership of Gaza. Hamas rejected that ceasefire call. It rejected a previous ceasefire call for that. It's rejected all calls for ceasefire. This resolution, it calls for a ceasefire only from Israel. Hamas continues to fire rockets into Israel, and it holds more than 100 hostages. About 20% of them are Americans. At any point, Hamas could release the hostages and stop firing rockets into Israel. It has chosen not to do so. There was already a temporary ceasefire called, and Hamas repeatedly broke it. It also continued to fire rockets into Israel at that point. There was a permanent ceasefire on October 6th. It was broken with the slaughter and rape of more than 1,000 Jews, including women and babies. Hamas followed none of the international law you cite, including using rape as a weapon, as recently reported in the New York Times, taking hostages, including babies, wearing civilian clothing, hiding among civilian populations, using them as shields, hiding military operations in houses of worship, hospitals, and schools. The 4th paragraph of your resolution considers Hamas and Israel as equally responsible for this conflict and equates the actions taken by Israel with those of Hamas. They are not the same. Our tax dollars go to a lot more countries than listed, obviously. That includes Sudan, where we now have the largest displacement in history of over 7 million people because of the genocide there. I have not seen any call for ceasefire in Sudan from this group. I have not seen any call for a ceasefire in Ukraine, where tens of thousands of people have died. You call for an immediate ceasefire, but not for the removal of Hamas, and you do so before calling for the release of the hostages. Israel simply cannot allow Hamas to continue operations from Gaza. Thank you for calling for strong leadership. I've met with the Jewish community at Cornell. I spoke at a rally of theirs, and I celebrated Hanukkah at Cornell. I've met with the members of the Muslim community in Lansing, where we have the only mosque in Tompkins County. I've broken bread with the Muslim community a number of times at that mosque. This is clearly not the response you are looking for. Hamas has already promised more October 7th if it is allowed to survive. A ceasefire at this point will only allow Hamas to reorganize. One of their constituents wrote in the letters that we've been receiving that Hamas was fighting a freedom for liberation. One of the speakers tonight, she looked at Hamas as freedom fighters. This is literally in their charter. Their goal is to kill Jews. I'd like to think that this was just one constituent or two constituents, but reading all of the comments that came in, I know this is simply not the case, that this support is lacking for Israel and what it has gone through. This is something new that's been coming up lately. The reference to South Africa has come up at least twice. Would like to point out that Julius Malema is probably going to be president of that country, and he's already called for the eradication of all white people in that country. So I would take anything that South Africa has to say on this matter with a grain of salt. Thank you very much for listening.
We have several legislators on Zoom that have their hands raised. Ann Corman, you are next.
Thank you. I want to say that just because this is difficult to think about doesn't mean we should be silent. And just because we might not get it perfect doesn't mean we need to stay silent. So I, for one, as one county legislator, would definitely be in support of Legislator Brooks' proposition to work with our Human Rights Commission to craft something and make sure that we figure out how to pass something. We need to say something, and I can't say exactly what it would be, but I am definitely willing to help with that. So thank you to my colleague, and thank you especially for all those that sent us emails and those that spoke out tonight. I know it's a challenge for a lot of folks, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Veronica Pillar, you're up.
Hey, thank you. I like Travis's idea, but I'll hold thoughts on that until someone explains the Robert's rules of it all. I wanted to speak now, just also thank you to everyone who spoke and emailed. Speaking a little bit, echoing Annie, just as an individual, as both an individual US citizen and an individual elected official representing thousands of people, sorry, distracted by a Zoom, I just want to call for three things, kind of echoing the Human Rights Commission resolution. One, to call for compassion and care from and for all Tompkins County residents, in general, of course, but specifically in the wake of the Israel-Hamas war, which is hurting our community. Of course, it's nothing the same as in the Middle East. The hurt here is not in the form of bombs or rockets or walls or drought and dehydration. But as you can hear, there's a lot of emotional, social, mental hurt from the fear instilled in people for various reasons, from hate speech, from grief and loss for loved ones in the region who are getting hurt. So I think that is important to speak on. And I'm so sorry to our residents for all the forms of hurt and loss that you may be experiencing. Second, in that vein, I suppose it cannot be said enough, condemn all forms of hatred and discrimination, including anti-Semitism, including Islamophobia, including anti-Palestinian sentiment that comes up in many forms, and there is no place for any of it here. And third, I do condemn the use of our tax dollars for inhumane violence and call on our national government to demand an immediate permanent ceasefire and withhold any further public money until the war crimes are ceased. I don't think we have to equivocate on not using public funds for violating basic human rights and violating the laws of war. We are stewards of public funds here at the county. Obviously, we don't, our scope is both in topic and in geography is much smaller than anything that stretches all the way to Israel or Palestine. But, we interact with higher levels of government. We know there's funding streams between the state and the nation. And we at this, I know I'm not at the table, but figuratively at this table have, and others in jobs like ours have a little more experience stewarding public funds than the average person. And based on that minor bit of experience, I do think it's okay for us to call for them not to be spent on killing civilians. And finally, I guess I want to highlight what some people said that I agree with, is that the calls for a ceasefire are not, how to say this? I think a response might be, but what about the Israeli hostages? Like, does this mean just not caring about them? No, it doesn't. I object to the continuing war. Yes, from a humanity moral standpoint, but also from a it's not going to work standpoint. It's not that the ends that it will achieve are noble, but the means are just so bad. It's that it's not going to achieve these ends anyway, as some of our commenters said. And I could condemn Hamas for the military arm of it. Hamas also governs the Gaza Strip, so if one's going to eradicate them, Israel has to figure something else about that. I can condemn them all day, but I am not aware that our tax dollars are funding them directly. And so that's why I'm focused on what our government does and what the Israeli military does. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Susan Curry.
Thank you. I'm honored to be the liaison to the Human Rights Commission, and I would like to thank them for all of their work and their compassionate discussions on this situation. Everything about this is terrible and difficult, and I know that all of us abhor the violence being inflicted by all of the entities, and that the Human Rights Commission has stimulated such wide-ranging discussions, as difficult as they may be, demonstrates the strength of our community. And that said, I would be willing to work with Legislator Brooks on this topic, whatever form that might take. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Amanda Champion.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who spoke and came out. Trying to kind of put my thoughts together, so bear with me. I had the lovely experience today of taking a nap with my 1-year-old granddaughter. And I was thinking about her and thinking about what Ellen said, because I was in my cozy bed with her, and she's the sweetest thing ever, and we were safe. We were safe and happy. And there's so many people right now who don't have that. We have a little bit of a mini UN thing going as well. Her father is Indian. Her mother is my stepdaughter, and she is Jewish on one side of her family. She's Canadian and Christian on her other side of the family. So this baby has the whole world. And she has enough love for everybody. She loves everybody. It's hard for me to think about the suffering that's happening. So I'm absolutely for peace, for a ceasefire, for ending all the horrible things that are happening all over the world, including right here in Ithaca. I'm a little bit maybe more cynical than some of my colleagues. I guess I don't really think that us passing a resolution, it doesn't have an impact on, it's not going to have an impact on the federal government. I think it might serve to make some people feel better. I think it might serve to make other people feel hurt and scared. So I'm unsure about passing a resolution. I would be supportive of Travis and Susan and maybe some other folks, talking through what that would look like. But I also wanted to just say I really appreciated Phoebe's statement about doing something every day. We can't go over there. We can't stop the war. We can't go to Ukraine and stop that war. Our money is being used in ways that we have no control over. That's just a fact. We're not going to stop that. But you can do something every single day for somebody else to be kind, or for yourself. Being kind to yourself and being compassionate to yourself is another way to stop suffering. I think we all beat ourselves up, we all beat each other up. And the only way to stop the suffering is to stop it within yourself. So I'll stop there. As has been said, it's a very hard topic. It's very nuanced. We all have different perspectives and different experiences and different family members. And mostly, I just hope for peace.
Shauna Black.
Thank you. I first off want to thank the Human Rights Commission. Gosh, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. I remember meeting with Pei, Joe, and Ruth in a room, and us coming together.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. And saying, like, what are we going to do with the Human Rights Commission? It is a mess right now, and there's so much work for this county to do. And where can we start? And I just want to thank the 3 of you that are in the room. I know Larry and Amos are also part of the commission. And I just want to thank you for your commitment and your dedication, because I know it has not been easy. And this is really good work that has come out of your advisory board. So I want to thank you for that. And I know the group of commissioners that are there, so I know this was really hard work, having consensus. So thank you so much for the work, and know that it's valued, and we really appreciate your opinions. I was listening to a podcast last weekend. It's called The Daily, and it is by the New York Times, and I know some people are skeptical about news outlets and the information they're presenting, but I found one part of it really interesting because it talks about Biden supporters. And it talks about an older demographic who has been around long enough, who has either had experience with the Holocaust or has lost loved ones, and they seem to be very in favor of and supportive of Israel. And then it literally goes through each demographic and each age group and talks about how the younger generation right now has seen Israel as a superpower and at times abusive. And so they're showing more support for Palestine. And I thought it was really interesting, the breakdown of people's ideas and people's support. And obviously it was, generic, and it doesn't define everyone based on these demographics, but it does give statistics, and it gives percentages. And so I thought that was interesting to get a perception kind of where people are coming from and why different generations are sometimes thinking different things. Anyway, with that said, I would absolutely love it if there were legislators that wanted to do a task force to come up with a resolution that, it's hard because we always talk about like these feel-good resolutions, and do they work, do they don't, just do our representatives put them in the recycle bin the second they read that it's from Tompkins. But I think, if there's something that we can do that gets 8 votes, then let's try and work on that. So I would support Travis and Susan and Veronica and Ann if they wanted to go forth and do the work and meet with the commission and come up with something. So thank you all.
Rich John.
Thank you, Dan, Chair. And thank you to everybody who came out and spoke to us this evening. We do live in a great country with the right to speak your mind, and you did it today, which is really a valuable thing. And I guess I'd want to talk to the procedural aspect. I don't think you need a motion tonight, Travis. I don't think you need our permission if this is what you wish to do. I think any number of us could go and work with the Human Rights Commission and try to put together a resolution. I would just mention that I agree with just about everything that's said in here, but I also agree with a lot of what Mike said, that I think the resolution should address Hamas as well. I have real skepticism that Hamas has any good faith here, and that a ceasefire might lead to just a couple of years, and they'll be doing it again. I don't know how anything changes from Hamas's standpoint. Maybe I'm wrong. There's certainly a world of things I just don't know about with what's happening in the Middle East. I read the paper, I listen to the radio, I talk to people, but frankly, this isn't what we do. You know, maybe the Tompkins County Legislature should have a component of foreign policy, and we should be given some authority to do something about it, but we don't. And we certainly don't control the federal budget or New York State's budget. We can express an opinion, and if that means anything, you know, I guess the resolution can come before us. I would caution, though, that when we do this kind of resolution and it gets 8 votes, that means there's 6 against. I don't know what kind of message that sends. We did one recently that I think came out 8-6 after extensive discussion. And you say, did we really say anything to anybody if it's 8-6? And maybe we're going to have great difficulty getting to a resolution that has, you know, 14, 13, or 12 in favor, but that's probably what we want to strive for if we can do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Before we go on, I just wanted to mention that Lee Shurtleff had to leave for an emergency, and I think by our rules we're supposed to announce when a legislator leaves. Next up, Deborah Dawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The difficulty that I've had with this whole issue, and with the many, many of you who've come out to talk to us twice, and I appreciate hearing what you have to say. What's concerned me most about hearing from you is that more than once, people have said, well, we need to view what's happening here in historical context. And the historical context in which the majority of the speakers have viewed this is the last 75 years of settler colonialism. This issue sits in the historical context of 2,000 years at least. It concerns me greatly that we ignore that, and that the resolutions that have been presented and the arguments that have been made ignore centuries of pogroms and persecution and expulsion of Jews from countries and confiscation of their goods and a 6 million person Holocaust that wasn't so long ago. We should still be remembering.
Like slavery.
We could leave. This is the legislator time to speak. Thanks.
So, to me, this issue is really complex and very nuanced. And to only look at it from the perspective of the last 75 years is like solving a Rubik's Cube by only looking at one side of the cube. And so I share many of the concerns expressed by Mr. Sigler, which happens rarely, as he will attest. And so I would hope that any group of us that tries to draft something that at least 8 of us can agree with will consider that larger historical context And as well, we received dozens of emails from people talking about genocide and ethnic cleansing on the part of Israel. I reiterate what Mr. Sigler had to say. Hamas's own charter indicates that it is an organization founded for the purpose of genocide. And you can laugh, sir, but I've read that charter. They've tried to clean it up, but it still basically amounts to the same thing. So I am concerned about how we would move forward to find some wording to a resolution that would cover all the reasons that we might want a ceasefire without adequately representing the historical context and the complexities in which this thing sits. The other piece of this is that I'm pretty pragmatic, having worked for the federal government, having been involved in state government, and now in county government. And I honestly don't see what difference it makes to anybody outside of Tompkins County what the Tompkins County Legislature as a group has to say. And I know many of you disagree with this, but this is not an issue that we can take a position on that's going to have any force with the people who make the decisions and dole out the money. So basically, you're asking us to take a moral position. You have every right to do that, but if you're asking me to take a moral position, it has to be my moral position, not yours. It's going to be very difficult for us to come up with a moral position, a statement of moral position that we all agree to. And as offended as some of you may be, that the United States government is sending money to Israel to be used to kill Palestinians, and you say not in my name, I'm a little concerned about somebody issuing a moral statement on behalf of the Tompkins County Legislature that I might not agree with, but that thing's going to go out in my name. And then finally, one thing that I've really struggled with all of this is what's our end game here? I mean, we can all take a position that we want a ceasefire. And I guarantee you, Bibi Netanyahu is not going to listen to any of us. He doesn't listen to his own government. He doesn't listen to the UN. He doesn't listen to any mitigating influence that the Biden administration has tried to express. He's certainly not going to be swayed by the Tompkins County Legislature, and neither is Hamas. So the only way that we could really cut this off, as far as I can see, is to stop sending military aid to Israel. And I want to ask you to consider what happens if we do that. And what happens if we do that is every Arab nation in the Middle East will annihilate Israel, where 9 million people live. And isn't that genocide too? I mean, this is what I mean. This is not one side of a Rubik's Cube, it's a cube. So I hope that whoever ends up trying to take on this task considers all those things as carefully as I'm sure the Human Rights Commission considered their product. And I want to compliment Pei and Ruth and everyone who contributed to this, because this is, in fact, the most balanced document that I've seen on this issue, and yet it still leaves me concerned. So thank you all for listening.
Greg Mezzi.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. This is a complex issue, but I don't think what we're being asked to do is all that complex. And let me sort of boil it down. There are a lot of things we do at votes of 8 to 6 and move on, and it's the will of the legislature. That's the rules, that's how it works. There's a lot of things that I voted no against that pass, that become the policy, the procedure, the whatever the case may be, but that's what it is. When you sign up, when you take this oath, when you sit at this desk, when you have this when you represent these the seats that you hold and the people that you represent, you sign up for things happening that you may not agree with, but it's ultimately the will of the legislature, and unfortunately that means 8, not 14. If we want it to mean 14, we need to change the rules. So I don't think 8 really matters, because 8 is how we do things around here. I can tell you, as someone who looks at all of those comments that come in via email or the letters that we get, it does make a difference. And if we have elected officials in Washington and Albany and other places that put them in the recycle bin, shame on them, and I hope in November you actively vote to get them out of office, because these conversations that we have, maybe it seems one-sided to those submitting the conversation. I can tell you, as one elected official, it does make a difference, and you are heard, at least by me, and I know many of my other colleagues take it very seriously. History, in my opinion, doesn't give anyone the right to further perpetrate an atrocity. So I think there are some things that we have to learn from history and inform, but I don't think killing of innocents is something that we have to look to history to condemn. I also think that we have a military that can operate with surgical precision, like literally to like the inch. You know, again, all of that stuff's classified. I don't really know fully, but this just doesn't seem surgical in the response. It doesn't seem precise in a response. While I support Israel's right to defend itself against terrorist attacks, and I will continue to condemn terrorist attacks against any country, against any people, I do think that Israel really needed and needs to be way more precise and way more specific in retaliating against those that perpetrated the attacks that they're responding to. When we say what difference does Tompkins County really have to say, we have 110,000 people that we represent, and it makes a difference to them. Our response necessarily is not for Biden, it's not for Schumer, Senator Schumer, Gillibrand, President Biden, it's not for Representative Molinaro, or the list goes on. It's for Tompkins County residents. It's people on both sides, on all sides, I guess I'll say all sides, because I don't necessarily know if there's just two sides of this argument, but on all sides of this conversation that are deeply hurt and are looking for us as their elected officials to do something. To say, stop killing people who have nothing to do with this, right? I don't think anybody's saying let Hamas continue to thrive, allow them to get the resources that they need. I'm not saying that. Others may be, but that's not a message that I'm going to send. And I just, I think you make a comment about being with your grandchildren, or that resonates, right? People should all have that right, and if they live in a place that's either oppressed by their leaders or by other forces, they have a right to be free. And I think that's what I hope to support. I was the first one that sort of kicked off this conversation with a resolution in response, and I learned from that process. And to one public commenter's comments, who were citing my comments, we do need a more nuanced resolution. I think this is very nuanced. Can we argue maybe some of the comments or the meaning up and before the resolve? Sure, and that's what debate is for, and that's what this process is for. But how can we really argue with the therefores, the real meat of what it's saying, right? We want to urge Tompkins County and other agencies to remind county residents that support's available. We appreciate the role of the legislature and provide strong leadership proactively, countering the various forms of fear, anxiety, and intimidation for our members of our Jewish and Muslim communities. What's the last one here? Stresses the importance of Tompkins County residents and agency and educational institutions to protect and support all county residents. I'm abbreviating. And obviously the first one calling for a ceasefire, but I think a key word there is sustainable, a sustainable ceasefire. We're not the ones that decide what sustainable means. If we want that, we need to run for higher office. We need to get in different positions. We're just saying, hey, do your job, right? If you're in Washington, if you're in Albany, do your job, figure it out, right? Advocate for something where we're just not blanketly bombing thousands of people. Yeah, I don't support the terrorist organization of Hamas. I don't support all of the things that the Israeli government has done. I think we do have responsibility to say something because if we don't, for members of our community, who else will? And that, I think, is what we're here for. It may not be a perfect resolution. We may not get 14, but if we get 8 and we send it off and we do our part in the complex system of government that we operate, then we have done our job. And if you want to do more, if you want to take it a step further, figure out ways to really make a more direct impact. But from our seat, this is what we can do. And I think by not doing anything, just because it's a complex issue, is a real failure on our part to do something at all. So, Travis, I'm with you, happy to support and join the conversation in putting together something that's palatable but also meaningful.
Randy Brown.
Tough act to follow there, Greg. It's a new year, and my issue with resolutions like this is that we can't have any impact on them. They're not received well by, or at all, by higher ups. But I do support Travis and other people drafting something that I hope I could vote for. There were, I would say, 80% of the things in that resolution that I supported. So I'm hoping something comes to that. But I think that the county has, I have 2 years left of my term, which is everybody else here, and we have a lot of very important things to work on. I would love to see a conversation and input from people on homelessness that took this long. We need to have hard conversations about many issues, and that's just one, and there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 other ones. But regarding the input from people, I think it's really important. War is an awful thing, and I can't help but think that the Biden administration has just made a mess of the world, and that's consequences for elections. But I just, too many wars, the innocent people get killed, the powers that be, they make decisions that don't help the average person, and the Palestinians, the Jews, the Ukrainians, the Sudanese, and the list goes on and on of in some cases, proxy wars that America is supporting. And we're $120 billion in aid to Ukraine to kill and destroy people, and to destroy buildings, and not to mention, I think probably 90% of those people are homeless now too. And who wins? Nobody wins. The people who make military products win, and the whole war thing. So I hope that's in there somehow, that we just can't continue these endless wars. But I really would encourage the public to come out and pay attention to the issues that are important to Tompkins County and voice your opinion on all those things and things we can do something about. So thank you.
Amanda Champion.
Thanks. I just wanted to, in terms of like process, like I think Travis or anyone could make a motion and say we would like to form a task force or whatever. That is a legitimate way to do it. I think we've had some questionable things that happened in the past where one legislator just went ahead and said, I'm going to do this. And then, so I think getting the input from the group is probably a best idea. We don't necessarily have to have a vote, but in terms of process, letting folks know that you might do that is a good idea.
Well, I've been thinking as this conversation goes on about what maybe the best way to do it is, and my thought right now is that there's not a need to formally form a task force to address this issue, that the legislators that are interested, and there's quite a few that expressed it tonight, can self-organize along with the Human Rights Commission and forge a resolution to present to everybody else. However, if somebody feels differently, Travis, you initiated this idea, or anybody else, if you feel like you would like to formalize it in some other way, now would be a good time to speak up. Oh, thank you. Ann Corman.
Hi, thank you. I don't think we need to formalize it, but I just also wanted to mention, because this was brought up by a few of my colleagues, that just as collectively our people coming to us, collectively the voices do matter, and so in that vein, more municipalities speaking out on this does matter. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Okay, so the idea of the interested legislators self-organizing, I want to just mention it one more time. Is that acceptable to everybody in the room and on the screen? Okay, then is there any other legislator privilege of the floor? Mike Lane.
I just wanted to mention, I dropped on everybody's desk a copy of an editorial from the Buffalo Evening News regarding the state law that was just passed and signed by Governor Hochul, which moves elections for counties and towns to even years. And the only change for us will be that after the election in 2025, we will serve for only 3 years. When I say we, I'm talking about the legislators on the county legislature. After that, the terms will return to 4 years, and they will be elected in an even year, which in that case would be 2028. So nothing right away happens with this. And so I don't think it's going to affect our Board of Elections, at least from the county standpoint right away. It also affects town elections, and it might have some earlier implications for them. We'll wait and see how that plays out. It does not affect city elections. It does not affect village elections, or I think things like school boards and other things. So I just wanted to point that out. I know it's a different outcome than we were supporting here, the majority were supporting, but I think this is a good outcome, and I think in the long run, this will mean that we will get better voter participation in local elections.
Mike, it also, am I correct, it does not affect the sheriff, the district attorney, and the county clerk?
Correct. Those are 3-year terms, and they are constitutional. Although both the sponsors of this state legislation and Governor Hochul have indicated that they may seek a constitutional amendment to change those as well.
Okay, any other privilege of the floor for legislators? All right, if there's no objection, we're going to take a 13-minute break. We'll reconvene at 8:20. Thanks.
Hey, I don't go to my house.
I'm glad that now we got him, so we get longer.
She's totally walking.
Good. Okay, we're back in session. We are up to reports by the county administrator. Holmes is on a well-deserved vacation, so here today is Norma Jane to speak on behalf of administration.
I have just a couple of brief updates. We will be scheduling white-collar union negotiation team meeting next week. And we've received some resumes for the budget director, and we'll start scheduling interviews for that as well.
Questions or comments for Norma?
So you'll be scheduling the negotiations next week. Is that when you're going to be scheduling them, or is that when it's going to happen?
We have, we have a meeting next week for white collar.
Just for the negotiation.
Just for the negotiation
group,
team.
not for the actual negotiations.
Okay. Didn't remember that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I mentioned it.
Any other questions or comments from Norma? Okay, thank you, Norma.
Welcome.
Next is County Attorney Holly Mosier.
All right, good evening. We continue to be busy, no rest for the weary. For whatever reason, family court continues to just be out of control. We have 2 new cases getting filed this week. I had 1 case today, last 2 hours in court. And then just to give you an idea, next week I have 9 cases in court, just in family court. Yeah, we're busy.
Keeps you out of trouble, Holly.
Yeah.
Questions or comments? Thank you, Holly. Next up is Director of Finance, Lori Scarrett, on Zoom.
Thank you. I do not have any updates tonight.
All right. Questions or comments for our Finance Director? All right. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Are there any resolutions to be added to or withdrawn from the agenda? No. All right. We do not have a consent agenda tonight, which is pretty amazing. I don't know if I ever remember that. So we are going to go right into the committee reports, standing and special committees. First up is Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee, Dan Klein, Chair. Thank you, Dan. I do not have a report tonight. And moving on to the Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee, Deborah Dawson, Chair.
Thank you, Captain Dan. The Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee will meet next Monday, and of general interest is the resolution to fund our reserve account.
Questions or comments for Deborah? Thank you. Next up, Workforce, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, Veronica Pillar, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. WDIC will next meet on January 24th. Otherwise, I have no report.
Questions or comments for Veronica? Next up is the Public Safety Committee, Rich John, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. I have no report other than to just give the jail statistics. We're at 64 with 3 board outs, and the committee will meet on January 18th at 3 o'clock.
Good. Questions or comments for Rich? Next up is the Downtown Facilities Special Committee, Randy Brown, Chair.
Yes, our next meeting is January 9th at 9 a.m. We're going to be looking at department locations, plans, and resolutions again, and among other things, deconstruction and what that really means for buildings. So,
questions or comments for Randy? For the Health and Human Services Committee, our next meeting will be on Wednesday, January 17th at 2 o'clock. This is not our normal day, but everyone should have that in their calendars. We will have Dr. Claypack, who's the County Medical Director, and he will be doing a presentation about supervised injection facilities. Questions or comments about the Health and Human Services Committee? Housing and Economic Development Committee, Greg Mezzi, Chair.
Thank you. We will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, January the 3rd at 3 p.m. here in the chambers. We have a shelter discussion under homelessness and housing with an introductory conversation in this committee to the term low barrier housing, low barrier shelters and the like, and a little bit more of an update from the press release that went out regarding the county beginning to explore the possibilities of some form of shelter. We also have the Strategic Tourism Implementation Grants resolution and a budget adjustment for the Community Housing Development Fund on the agenda.
Very good. Questions or comments for Greg? Okay, thank you. Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Mike Lane, Chair.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We haven't met since our last meeting of the legislature, and we will meet again on the 18th. Travis mentioned that he'd like our committee to look at this issue with the TCAD and UPI. So, Travis, if you would like, I will schedule a preliminary discussion about that if you could attend and explain to us what you would like us to consider. Does that make sense? Thank you. Paul?
Deborah.
Yeah, I don't know what that meeting's going to look like, but I think in the interests of balance and transparency, if we're going to hear from UPI, we should also hear from TCAT.
I guess I wasn't talking about inviting them. I wanted to have Travis come in and talk to us about what we might want to look at.
Okay, thank you.
And if in the future, we might want to bring the others in.
Any other questions or comments for Mike Lane? Okay, next up is Government Operations Committee, Amanda Champion, Chair.
Thank you. We will be meeting on this coming Thursday at 9 a.m., bright and early. We have kind of a light agenda, but I did want to bring something to everyone's attention. At our last GO meeting, we talked with Jay Franklin, our Director of Assessment, about the possibility of switching to a triennial cycle. And he brought this to us to have a discussion about reluctantly. This is not his preferred method of assessment, but because of the stress and strain on the real estate market, all the changes, he thought it would be good to talk about. So we did. If you want to go back and watch that, you certainly can. The committee felt like it would be a good idea to ask him to bring a resolution to us to talk about again, invite you all to come to talk about what this might mean, and then possibly to bring it to the full legislature so we could have a discussion, because this is something, this would be a pretty big change that we should all take part in, having that discussion. And I'm not saying, I didn't get the sense from GO members that this was like something we wanted to do necessarily, but we want everyone to have a part in the conversation. So we will be talking about it again. He sent a memo, which I'm not sure got sent to everybody, so I'm gonna make a note and have that sent to you all from last month, which kind of goes through a lot of it. Other than that, we have a light agenda on Thursday, and I have one resolution. Okay, and that resolution is establishing 2024 meeting dates, and I would move that.
As he seconds. Mike Lane.
I'd like to make an amendment. Would like to add to the resolution that we would meet on July 2nd for our regular first meeting of the month. I would note that July 4th isn't until Thursday, so if we met on Tuesday, it's still 2 days before the 4th.
Okay, there's an amendment on the floor. Is there a second? Randy Brown seconds. Discussion. Mike.
Up until I think last year, maybe the year before, we've always met twice every month. And there was some discussion about whether it would give a break to our staff. My feeling is that they're all entitled to their vacations, I think this becomes more of a vacation for the legislators, and I don't think we need that.
Shauna Black.
Yeah, so I think we've actually been doing this for at least 4 years. And I remember the first year it started, we had actually reached out to our clerks and had a conversation with them, and they said that it was very helpful because it did allow them to actually take some of their vacations during that time. Because even with 4 clerks, they're having a hard time taking vacations and taking breaks and spending time with their families. So, I mean, we've always been able to do the work of the county in that one meeting in July. So I'll definitely be supporting this.
Randy.
Yeah, I know we did this last year. If memory serves, the meeting after that was a really long meeting.
It
So
was,
in 7-hour meetings don't make sense to me, 6-hour meetings, so I liked Mike's amendment, so.
Greg.
The 2 years that I opposed Mike's amendment was because of where it fell on, I think, the Monday or the Tuesday. And I do think that creates some conflicts. Just like I think today's meeting could create a lot of conflict for some people. As you noticed, if we didn't have public comment, this would be like a 3-minute meeting if we didn't debate the calendar. So I just think that it does make sense to add it this year based on where it falls on the calendar. But I think we should be open to the idea, if it does fall earlier in the week, to making adjustments, because there's still plenty of time to take off having a meeting on that Tuesday before the July 4th holiday this year.
More discussion.
Point of information?
Yes.
So you're saying put it on as a meeting, but then consider canceling it if we don't have a heavy schedule?
No, I'm saying I support it. I have not supported it in the past because of where it fell on the calendar. But always, too, if we don't have, I mean, I don't think we should cancel meetings. So no, I would not be saying that.
Rich.
Yeah, I will not support the amendment. I think this is okay, and it has worked to help our clerks, but also us. You know, I don't think we can ignore that we have a lot of meetings. We sit in meeting after meeting, and yeah, cognizant that the second meeting in July was a bit longer last year, I think there were some other things causing that. It wasn't just the accumulation of not having the first meeting. I think, well, I can't remember, but I would note also that our clerks have young children, and this is summertime. It is the time that they can actually go on a trip or something. It has more meaning for them perhaps than us, but it helps us too, I think. It's good to get a break.
Amanda.
Yeah, I'll just say what I say every year. I think that, the local government is not going to collapse if we only have one meeting in July. I think it's good to have a time where things can slow down a little bit, and that is in July when people might be on vacation. They might just want to, take a little time off. Yeah, that's it.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, the amendment is to add that July meeting back into the calendar, and we will now have a roll call vote.
Shauna Black.
No.
Travis Brooks.
No.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion. Susan Curry.
No.
Deborah Dawson.
No.
Rich John.
No.
Ann Corman.
No.
Mike Lane.
Yes?
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
No.
Lee Shirtliff is excused. Mike Sigler.
No.
3 ayes and 10 noes. Motion fails. Dan Klein, sorry.
It's okay. No, I'm a no. We're all getting used to it.
You don't get to vote anymore, Dan.
Okay, that's still.
No problem.
They didn't tell you?
Or
You don't get a vote.
3 ayes and 10 noes. Motion fails.
I feel like the mayor.
Okay, the motion fails. So we're back to the main motion. Any further discussion on setting the calendar for the year? Okay, another roll call vote, please.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Mike Lane.
Yes.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
It's 13 ayes. Motion passes.
Deborah.
Thank you. As long as we're on the GO section of the meeting, I would ask that GO consider, I don't know if it'll take an amendment to the rules of the legislature or just an amendment to the blue cards, but I think tonight and other nights when we've had large groups of people, we've had clapping and interruptions from the audience, and I don't think that's appropriate. And I think it would be much easier for whoever's chairing a meeting to enforce a no audience participation kind of rule if it was on the blue cards. Thank you.
Amanda, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, Brittany and Katrina, they are thinking about that already, and we can certainly talk about it at GO and see what makes sense.
Greg, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, if we're putting out our GO wish list for the new year.
I do think that's the time of the meeting, yeah.
Okay. Amanda, if your committee could look at addressing the IRS regulation of taxable legislator mileage and memorializing that in some way into either a policy update or change to the rules, whatever is the most appropriate mechanism for that. And then also an understanding of how that will be administered and applied for 2024, because I'm guessing we're out of compliance for 2023.
Yeah, and I believe Holly, or no, somebody sent
Norma
an email.
sent it. Thank
Norma
you.
sent an email, yeah. So definitely.
Yeah, I saw that. That's what made me, and thank you, because that was on my list of things to do. So Norma beat us to it.
On the to-do list.
Thanks. And just another question too, did Jay mention at all, Jay Franklin, in his comments about going to triennial, there was a budget adjustment for a person to be added to his staff to address annual assessments and the need for more work volume. Would triennial assessments at all have any impact on department staffing or that position that we just voted on?
Please.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get it correctly, but a lot of it does have to do with staffing. And I'm vaguely remembering that we added a person, but he was suggesting, and GO members, correct me if I'm wrong, that they would need numerous more people to be able to keep up with regular, 100% assessment. So that's all part of the conversation, for sure.
On this topic, Mike? Yes, go.
I don't know if it was numerous, but yes, he did say we need more staff.
Yeah.
Ann Corman.
Thank you, Chairperson Klein. I just wanted to, it doesn't have to be answered now, but clarification on the email regarding mileage reimbursement. It said 2 meetings, so I just wanted to make sure, did that mean for legislature reimbursement to meetings anywhere in the county, to meetings just to legislature? And then what about meetings from the legislature to somewhere else? Thank you.
Amanda.
I think that's what we'll talk about, Annie.
Mike Sigler.
Bypass.
Pass, okay. Anything else on government operations? Better than just one little resolution. All right, next up is Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee, Ann Corman, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson Klein. And just want to note, as we're working on getting more gender-neutral terms in our policies, so I hope it's okay with your permission that I address you as Chairperson Klein.
If that's what you wish, sure.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I mean, Chairperson Klein. Yes, so Peak Planning, Energy and Environmental Quality Committee, we have not met since our last legislature meeting. We're going to meet at a different day of the week due to the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, which is on the 15th. So we are going to be meeting the next time on Wednesday, January 17th at 10 a.m. and we don't have our agenda set yet. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Chairperson Corman? All right. Thank you. Do we have any individual member-filed resolutions? Okay. Would somebody move the minutes of the previous meeting, December 19th? Rich John moves. Deborah seconds. Discussion of the minutes. Okay, let's have a vote.
Shauna Black?
Yes.
Travis Brooks? Yes. Randy Brown?
Yes.
Amanda Champion?
Yes.
Susan Curry?
Yes.
Deborah Dawson?
Yes.
Rich John?
Yes.
Ann Corman?
Yes.
Mike Lane?
Yes.
Greg Mezzi?
Yes.
Veronica Pillar?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Dan Klein?
Yes.
13 ayes. Motion passes.
Okay, is there any unfinished business? Okay, we're going to need to go into executive session. We have 3 items. We're going to go in for a discussion regarding proposed, pending, or current litigation. And there are 2 matters concerning the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property, or the proposed acquisition of securities, or sale or exchange of securities held by such public body, but only when publicity would substantially affect the value thereof. Is there somebody that would move to go into executive session? Travis moves. Is there a second? Shauna seconds. Have a vote.
Shauna Black?
Yes.
Travis Brooks?
Yes.
Randy Brown?
Yes.
Amanda Champion? Susan Curry?
Yes.
Deborah Dawson?
Reluctantly, yes.
Rich John?
Yes.
Ann Corman?
Yes.
Mike Lane?
Yes.
Greg Mezzi?
Enthusiastically, yes.
Veronica Pillar?
So ornery.
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Dan Klein?
Yes.
13 ayes. Motion passes.
Okay, we're going to go into executive session. It's going to take a minute to switch over with the screens and streaming, so stretch, but don't go too far.